So welcome to the first parallel session, this one about collaborative tools and technologies. Before we jump into the topic, I'd like to ask all the people in the back to move forward so that the speakers don't feel alone. In this session, as the title suggests, we talk about tools used for collaboration. And the first talk by Niels van Dijk, I hope I spelled that right, pronounced that right. I have a second chance with the second talk. We talk about domestication of applications, i.e. how do we actually get to play the applications nice in a federated environment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome all. My name is Niels van Dijk. I work for SurfNet in the Netherlands. I'm a technical product manager for the SurfConnect platform, which my colleague Paul will talk about after me. Interesting. This originally was a dual presentation between Heather Flanagan of Internet2 Co-Manage and myself, but unfortunately Heather couldn't make it, so you'll have to deal with me for the rest of the presentation. I will be talking about domestication, what it is, why we should want domestication. I dive a little bit into the use cases for end users, for institutions. And finally, well, I'm a technical guy, so I also do a very small introduction into the technology and the steps that you need to take if you want to do it yourself. So, what is the reason for dealing with domestication? Actually, we see a number of scenarios where applications are becoming distributed throughout campuses, throughout the cloud. And one of the core scenarios which we are dealing with within SurfNet is collaboration, virtual organizations. In collaboration, you see that it's actually institutions sharing applications in between them and sharing them between, for example, research groups. These applications will live in many different campuses, might also be off-campus, but somehow they need to make sure that identity and group memberships, etc., can be shared over these applications. Collaboration over campus borders is actually sort of the same. Then it's primarily not so much on collaboration, but on e-learning, for example. And another scenario where domestication comes into play is when institutions start to move stuff to the cloud, whatever the cloud may be, and want to combine that with campus-based applications and still want to provide a coherent use for their end users. So to give you some examples, and these were collected in between the work that SurfNet has been doing and the work that Co-Manage has been doing. For example, LIGO. I will not try and pronounce what the actual abbreviation means, it's over there. It's a very large VO, international VO, many collaborators and even smaller VOs within the big one. They're actually looking at gravity and gravity stuff, so it's hard science, as you may call it. They have very expensive equipment that they need to share because it's simply not, they're simply not able to pay for it with one institution. Well, they have some really interesting identity management if you start looking at it, and actually the Co-Manage Spaces wiki has some very good detailed descriptions of how their identity management stuff is done. And they've started picking up federated identity management and group stuff, and are already seeing that this is working for them, and that they can make it easier for their end users to start using these distributed applications. Another fairly similar VO case, also in the US, is the iPlant Collective Collaborative, which is actually biologists moving over to using and sharing ICT stuff. And interesting there is that they have thousands and thousands of end users, ranging from academia to K-12 to, well, very big spread out over many organizational parties. Within the Netherlands, we have some campus use cases, like for example 3TU, which is a collaboration between 3 technical universities in the Netherlands. And one of the things they want to do is to offer shared curriculum to students. So a student of Enschede University can go and take classes in Delft, for example. And actually, when you look at it from a technical perspective, this means that they somehow need to open up their e-learning systems for the other students. But they do not want to create the other students and their accounts in their own IDM systems. And to add to that, they want to share the concept of a class or as a group between these e-learning systems. And the other use case, which is currently very dominant in the Netherlands, is the fact that many universities are outsourcing stuff like, for example, their email to Google or to Microsoft. And they want to combine this with the e-learning and administrative systems that they have on campus. They actually want to share identities and groups between the cloud and the campus. So to make sure that that you can do this and that it is still a coherent experience for the end user, you need to apply something to make sure that this is working and this is still manageable for both user experience but also for the people administering all these accounts. And actually, to do this, you need 4 things. You need a trust framework, you need attributes, you need groups, and you need to be able to deal with roles and rights. And fortunately, by now, we have the stuff that you need to do this. For the trust framework, we can use identity federations. Identity federations, I will not go into exactly what an identity federation is. I sort of assume that you have a basic idea of that. They handle the authentication at a local institution for a remote service. Along with this authentication, you can send attributes, properties of people, like his email address, his name, stuff like that. And actually, you can use these to provision the remote applications. You could also do aggregation of additional attributes, for example, group membership. To use groups, you need to externalize groups and group membership from the application and make sure that you have tools to centrally manage group relations for your applications. You can do this within a campus, or you could imagine something like, for example, a VO platform that manages groups for this VO. And finally, if you have all of these, you can have roles and rights determined from the attributes and from the groups. You could imagine the fact that the institution states that this person is a student will give him the right to buy software products X, Y, and Z in a web shop, while the professor will get other software offered. Or the fact that both the professor and the student are members of group collaboration on e-learning, I don't know, something like that, will give them a specific spot, a specific place in a collaboration document sharing tool where they can share their content relevant to their group. And actually, domestication is the process of making sure that we can apply this, well, I've called it putty, gluey stuff, to applications and to services, to make sure that applications and services can use all these things and apply them. A somewhat more formal definition, I will not read it. Well, okay, time enough. So, interesting is that domestication fits nicely into the service-oriented architecture idea, where services become reusable because of the standards you can apply. It becomes much easier to share generic information among services and it also becomes much easier to hook up a new service or a similar service and replace a previously delivered service. And actually, domestication is especially useful if you go multi-domain, but you have to take care of the delegation of trust there. I will get into that a bit later. So let's now move to the different perspectives. From an end-user perspective, why is domestication a nice thing? Well, first of all, the applications will leverage single sign-on for the end user if you're using an identity federation. One user can log in at one application, and when he arrives at the next, he will simply be logged in straight away, or it appears to him or her that he's logged in straight away. The other thing is that he will only need to remember one password, and he will only have one identity, the one of his home institution, and this can be reused over and over again for many applications. And the other interesting thing is that the end user will experience real-time changes in his attributes and in his group memberships, and even in his roles, if this is how the applications implement that, which is pretty convenient. No need to wait for the admin to do the nightly sync or something like that. It can be done in real time. There are some setbacks, however, from the perspective of the end user. One of the things is that the end user will be presented with a wave, a where are you from screen. Every application will present a wave screen to make sure that the end user can choose which institution he is from. And actually this is a interfering step in him or her going to the actual application, and depending a bit on how heavy the wave screen itself is branded, it might also throw users in confusion. Until recently, it was not possible to do this beyond the browser. But fortunately, recently, especially for those of you who have been following the moonshot work that was presented here yesterday as well, it's becoming more and more feasible to use this kind of technology beyond the web and, for example, do a federated login in an SSH server or do a federated calendaring server, something like that. One other thing that still puzzles many end users is the lack of single logout. There are some single logout opportunities and some single logout technology available in Shibboleth. But if you want to implement this really thoroughly and make really sure that the user is logged out in every application, you will have a very hard time. From an organizational perspective, there are clear pros for this. The institution will remain in control of the credentials and the authentication for the end users. If you as a university do not want a user to log into a specific service, you can simply block his authentication and he will not get in. Your users will be happy and secure. No need to remember very difficult or long passwords, only one is good enough. And you can make provisioning and deprovisioning much more easy because you're only dealing with one set of identities. There are some setbacks though. You need to release attributes, and this appears to be troublesome for institutions. Some of these might even be privacy-sensitive attributes. On the other hand, if you want to build real collaboration applications, you will most likely need at least the ones I've listed here. And the other thing is, of course, you will need to run and install IDP software. And that is a burden for an institution. Other stuff that is sort of lurking beneath the surface is that you need to have your identity management stuff organized in your institution, and it's actually also pretty tough sometimes. And finally, it might be a good thing to organize as IDPs or as institutions to make sure that you have combined power to convince service providers to actually implement federated authentication, externalized group stuff, so that these applications really work well with the stuff that you can provide as an institution. There are, nevertheless, also many advantages for the service providers. One of the most valid and the most valuable things is that you get valid, up-to-date, and also verified user data instead of self-asserted data, for example. Another interesting thing is that it makes sure they can focus on their core business, not on all the other stuff, and not on the authentication stuff. It will reduce their administrative overhead because they can do away with the I lost my password problem. And once they've installed the service provider bits in their application, it's very easy to hook up to many federations. So actually, once you've done this, it scales very well. But on the other hand, most services already have something to do authentication and to implement groups. They have APIs, and you somehow need to combine these legacy, I might call them here, APIs with new APIs. And actually, for most of them, these new APIs are sort of unknown. Most vendors have never heard of SAML, for example. So what can we do as NRENs? Actually, 4 things. We can create an economy of scale for the service providers so that it becomes feasible for them to adopt this technology. We could domesticate applications ourselves if nobody chooses to do this. We can provide standardized interfaces, APIs, and libraries for developers to make sure that it becomes way easier to integrate all this stuff. And we need to deal with scaling of trust. So what does it mean if you want to do it yourself? This is an example of what it would look like if you implement a just-in-time provisioning based on a domesticated application with SAML federation and an external group relation system. Actually, there's a number of steps. You need to authenticate. You need to, the application then needs to update the last login, preferably. You need to get attributes. You need to update the user status. You need to get groups, create or update the group memberships, get the roles, set these roles in the application, and then the user is ready to go. And actually, this is sort of a two-step thing. On one hand, you need to query a lot of external systems or make sure that the information is provided via a SAML assertion. And on the other hand, you need to provision the application. And these are two very distinct worlds for which different solutions exist. For example, authentication, our primary technology is SAML2 for that. Well, if you already have an application that can do SAML authentication, you're good to go, but you will find that mostly this is not the case, and you need to do some extra work. So you can implement either Shibboleth or Simple SAML or something like that. If that doesn't work, you can also try to apply a proxy, like the example over here where this is what SurfNet did to domesticate Adobe web conferencing. And actually, using a proxy is good, but is also pretty complex. If you need attributes, you could use the SAML assertion to get attributes. They're mostly standardized, so that's a good thing. You could do SAML attribute query. It's a standard, but it's not widely implemented. You could do an out-of-band query for attributes, like querying an LDAP or a web service API. And, well, worst case, you could have your end users fill in the missing attributes. I would not prefer to go there, actually. Getting group information actually pretty nasty as well currently. There is no standard for exchanging group information. So you could, again, use SAML assertions, but this will only give you group information at login. And also, it's cumbersome for the IDP to manage all this stuff. Attribute queries would be very good here, but as I said again, they're not widely implemented. Again, another mechanism like LDAP, SPML, web service APIs could be good. One interesting and tricky bit is when you need group attributes before the actual user ever logged in. And actually, this is a pretty common scenario for advanced collaboration applications. Like, for example, you want to send an email to all the members of the group, but you are the only member of this group who has ever logged into the service. What do you do? How do you get the email addresses of the other members? Sorry. Getting and applying roles can be done based on, well, the information you by now have. Again, you can use the same mechanisms to transfer this. What we currently see is that you must take care that users will not start abusing groups as roles, because then you will get a group. This is the group of admins that can manage service XYZ. Well, that is sort of okay-ish, but if you keep up doing that, you end up with, this is the group of users that can edit document X, and edit document Y, and edit document Z. And then, of course, you will get millions and millions of groups, and actually you've completely broken the usefulness for using groups. And again, the problem here is how do you apply roles based on groups if you do not have all the attributes of the users yet? Provisioning the application is mostly application specific, and that's actually a problem. That means that you have to do it over and over again based on what the actual application offers you. So preferably, you leave it over to the vendor. If you cannot do that, try and use APIs, because that abstracts the provisioning process. Well, if even that is not available, there's nothing left to do but hack the application. And actually, that's been the strategy employed by many NRENs from my observation. If you had the opportunity to visit the Wednesday morning session in B room, there was an interesting presentation on the types of applications and the problems you run into when you start doing provisioning and deprovisioning in identity federations. And the slides are still online, I think. Talking about deprovisioning, this is a major gap. We have no good means of doing deprovisioning in federated identity management, in a federated identity management environment. We have just no way of telling a service that a person has moved from the IDP. And this is really a problem. And I currently cannot present any real solutions there. I'm sorry. Applications that have been successfully domesticated so far have been collected by Internet2 and SurfNet in a thing we've called the domestication wiki. The URL is over there. And well, there's a number of applications already, and actually we've sort of ranked them by how well they are integrated. We have devised a number of criteria for it. So if you get a 6, that means that you can sort of run them out of the box, use federated authentication with it, use external groups with it. And if you sort of score 0, you're not even in the wiki, because you can just simply not use this application. So to conclude, sorry, one slide before I conclude. The future of domestication, we need to settle on standards, for example, for groups. We need to reduce and standardize the number of implementations that we give to developers and make it much, much easier for them to implement this stuff. And we will most likely want to domesticate even more and, for example, make sure that events and messages, but also monitoring and reporting become standardized, and we have standardized APIs for that. Domestication beyond the web is definitely the next frontier. And to wrap it up, what do we need to do as NRANs? We need to harmonize these attributes that we released in our federations. If we would have only one set, it would be so much easier for service providers to implement it because they know what to expect. We need to deal with the other federations out there, the OpenID federations, for example, and make sure that we can interoperate with them. And there are some interesting initiatives there going on recently. We need to standardize group attribute exchange. Otherwise, we will see many, many implementations, and everybody will reinvent the wheel. We need to find some way of triggering deprovisioning. Don't know how to do that yet, but triggering seems to be the most useful case. And the other interesting thing is that we may look at our licensing models. Current licensing models are typically, here you have this application and you buy this for the entire campus. That just doesn't work if you're a VO. I mean, a VO has 5 people from one campus and 5 people from another campus and 5 people in Beijing and 5 people in the US. And who's going to pay for that license? Not the institution, probably. So it would be really nice if we have licensing models where you can buy seats of an application as a group, as a VO group. But we're definitely not there yet. And with these challenges, I leave you, and I'm open for questions. Jan.
First, a small remark. I think you missed one of the things that you need to address in pushing this forward. I'm on the service provider side, and yes, all those things are correct. You need to push them, but you need to push them forward faster because you're actually hindering my service development and deployment. And I've also done the multi-federation deployment, and that was just really a pain in the neck. Yeah. I thought, after 5 years of discussing, that attribute harmonization had been done. Then it turns out that across Europe, not even the concept of an organization name has been standardized so that I, as a service provider, can expect that to be one common attribute. That is, it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort. That's not the question, though. The question is...
But it's a very valid remark, though. Thank you. Yeah.
So I thought I'd just give that to you on the identity provider side. That that is something that I run into when I try to use this great stuff that you've built.
Actually, I would consider myself more on the service provider side. That's why I presented this slide. But anyway.
The question is, I now run a file sender service. I run a federated Adobe Connect service. I've run a personal certificate portal. When users see the service fail because of a federated error, an error in the federated logon, I get the blame. Yet there's nothing that I can do about that. What I've also seen is that users find the federated logon user experience fairly hard to grasp. So my question is, how are you planning to improve that user experience, and what are you planning to do with, what are your thoughts on improving call it the blame game or the resolution game between federations and service provider now. And then we will have group attribute providers, and we will have more. Stuff is getting more complex, and ultimately the user is interested in the service.
Yeah, I agree. To answer the easiest question of these two first, sort of the easiest, it's the integration bits. I think, well, what you're stating is absolutely correct, and a study from JISC, for example, painfully showed how crappy actually user experience can be if you do federated authentication. And fortunately, this is now very high on the agenda of, for example, refeds and within the EMC Square community. Will this fix it yesterday? No. Tomorrow? Even not tomorrow, even not next week, but we're slowly moving there. Another issue is, of course, that service providers actually need to implement this stuff. They need to sort of accept that a foreign thing is in their application to make sure that the experience becomes better. But simply standardizing on, for example, your login button will always be in the upper right corner, something like that, would already help a lot. The support question is very tricky. Within SurfNet, we've now made sure that we collect the actual data from the services where they state what their help desk is and what their support email addresses are, etc. And we have created sort of a routing system, so to say. But yes, indeed, as a federation operator or a service operator dealing with services, you often get people phoning you with this and that is broken. The other thing which we should really do is make sure that we'll not give them the SAML la-di-la error, because an end user will definitely not understand what's going on there, but simply tell them, hey, apparently something broke. Go and contact the service you wanted to contact.
Any more questions?
Nicole.
I'll be nice. I was just wondering what your thought is about what the best level to do domestications at, because you can domesticate at the institutional level, you can take it at the sort of federation or NREN level that you guys, at the sort of the NREN level that you have, but obviously all federations are going to be looking at wanting to domesticate in this way. So at what level can we best and most effectively look at domesticating these apps to get the best gain for everyone?
Ultimately, I think it's the vendor's responsibility to do this. We as NRENs and even the institutions, we are not software development companies. We cannot sustain long-term development of software products. So ultimately, we as NRENs and as institutions should try to push vendors to implement this stuff. If we cannot do that for whatever reason, then try to do it as a highest level as possible, so at the NREN level possibly, and collaborate and make sure that if we have an application like FileSender, it's not that and RNet and Uninet and SurfNet will do the domestication bit. And that's actually why we have the wiki, because we found out already in between Internet 2 and SurfNet that several people within our communities have been domesticating applications, and we only found out after we also had done that. So reinventing the wheel is really a big issue here.
I think still time for one short last question. No one? I have one. We've touched on this yesterday briefly, and that's how to domesticate all the data protection legislation if we go federations that cross borders. I didn't see that on your slides.
It is definitely a very big problem, but it is not really a problem of domestication itself. I mean, domestication is primarily a thing where the application assumes that there is a trust relation established and that all of this is being dealt with. That's not a really fair answer, because I'm very much aware that actually dealing with this is a big issue and is definitely a problem for working with domesticated apps. So unless that has been dealt with, this will most likely not fly or be much harder to use. Yes.
Okay. So thanks, Niels, for that interesting presentation. So the next speak is by another Van Dijk, Paul Van Dijk, and he's going to talk about surf context, which seems to be an interesting approach of making as the next killer application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Well, there will be some redundance compared to the presentation Niels just gave, but my name is Paul van Dijk. I'm a product manager at SurfNet, so there will be a little less more technical point of view in this presentation. Well, to meet modern collaboration needs in higher education and research, we need efficient ways to share data, to share resources and functionality. That's why we're all sitting here in this room. But that's also why SurfNet developed this new infrastructure called SurfConnect. So Connect is for connecting, next generation, and collaboration. In the next 20-25 minutes, I will show you the why, the how, and the what. And I will also give you some demonstrations of how this infrastructure works and some new things we are currently working on. Okay, let's start from an end user perspective. That's what we are all doing it for. They are facing a huge abundance of applications that are out there available. I mean, students, researchers, teachers, they all found their own ways to new applications in the cloud. And well, like they bring their own devices to the institution, they also start using them without consulting the ICT person at the institution. And well, for every discipline, they of course want to use best of breed applications and do not want to make concessions if it concerns the functionality they need for their research efforts. At the same time, from an institutional point of view, they are dealing with integrating these applications. How can they get these cloud applications into the campus environment and the other way around? And how can they share facilities? For example, the electron microscope over there. A device that's available in one hospital but not in the other. And how can they share them in a safe way? So that means that we need to collaborate on collaboration. It's like networking the networkers. This is our credo. We have to make clever choices, choose open standards. And in the slipstream we will have many open source products available. And we have to create coherence. And the first step to create this coherence is what SurfConnect was implemented for. So then what is SurfConnect? Well, actually it exists of 4 basic components. The Surf Federation with SAML2 is the cornerstone, the most important requirement to get applications to use them in an integrated way. And well, of course, for users, this means that there is no threshold in getting access, ease of use. But if we extend identity management in the federation with group management, and luckily our colleagues from the Internet 2 created the grouper software to create groups and to share these groups, to use them over different applications from different providers. We took this group of software and created an interface, a lightweight interface for end users to create their own groups. And that's what we called Surf Teams. Later on I will give you a small demonstration how that works. The third building block is Open Social. So how many of you are actually using Open Social? Please raise your hands. Oh, liars. You're all using it. Because if you're using LinkedIn or MySpace or Orchid, then under the hood there's Open Social. And that actually means 2 things. One concept of Open Social is the data API. And that means that there's a specification and how your profile is described. But it also specifies your friends relations, your group memberships, your groups, and also your activities. Well, and by the way, this group specification can be used for Surf Teams. The other concept of Open Social is the Gadget API. And we all know one of the most known instances, iGoogle, is based on the Gadget API. But nowadays we see many more portals that implemented the Gadget API as well. And then we come to the fourth building block, which is having enough collaboration tools available that support these standards, SAML and OpenSocial. And preferably also have group support, externalized group support. So if you take these four building blocks together, then we say we have a synergy, and that's Surf Connect. Now, let's take a little example. We have here this classroom example, a group of students with the professor in front of them, and they decided to do part of their coaching and collaboration work in a wiki, and maybe share some documents, have some video conferences. Well, when you're using Surf Connect, the first step you take is to create a group for these people in this room. So then you go to Surf Teams. It's just a very simple interface. Start creating a new group and start inviting people to become a member of this group. And of course, this is all with federated logon. So there are a number of members in this group, Bachelor Informatics students. This professor is the admin of this group, and now we can start using this group in different applications, no matter whether they are commercial applications provided by Entrance or self-hosted institutional applications, as long as they provide SAML and OpenSocial support. So then there is a choice to make. This is a very simplified architecture of the infrastructure, the functional components. At the bottom you see a number of campus services, for example, to share documents, or maybe a learning management system like Blackboard. And in the other box you see just a number of external services available, but you can imagine this is the holy grail. That's where many of these nice applications, killer apps are. For example, File Sender. You will hear about it later on. But then in the middle, there is Surf Connect. It's a sort of glue where you can link up these applications. It's using the supporting services Surf Federation, Surf Teams. It's using OpenSocial as the standard. And then as a user, you can start using these applications here at the bottom by passing through the Surf Connect's middleware. So that would look like something like this. For example, Library Social Office to share documents can be used to single sign-on, and if you go into Library, you will have your group context available there. There's a notion of your groups, and you can start creating a site and put documents in there. By the way, Library is now hosted by a commercial party in the Netherlands and linked up to the Surf Connect's middleware. Another example is Sakai as a learning management system. This one is provided by the University of Amsterdam, and also as a proof of concept or a pilot, they connected this service to Surf Connect. Another example, Google Apps linked to Surf Connect. Okay, so how does that look like if you go to the browser? Oh. Need to make a little change here. Yes. So we created this group already. The group Bachelor Informatics exists. People have been invited. People accepted the invitation, and now they are a member of this group Bachelor Informatics. So if, for example, they want to use Alfresco, another document sharing solution, then we go to this web application, and you get the famous wave. Well, I'm a staff member of SurfNet, so I will use that as my home institution. Log on. And then within a few seconds, we are in. Well, and if you look here at the left, you see that this application has a notion of my group membership. These are the groups that I'm a member of, and sometimes I'm the administrator of. And here, over here, I created a site, Bachelor Informatics. I hope you can see it. It's not that big, but go into there, put some documents in there. But what's a nice feature when having these group awareness is that you can add this group to the site. And although Niels is not very happy with linking roles to groups, it's possible in here. So I search for groups, and I can just add this group over here and select a role for this group for my team members. Well, that's Alfresco. Same applies for LiveRay, provided by another commercial hosting partner. Because it's single sign-on, we're right in there. And if we look at the sites over there, these are all linked to my groups in Surf Teams. Well, and to take one other example, Big Blue Button, because these students also would like to do some video conferencing, go to this open source video conferencing solution. Come on. Yes, there it is. So now we are the interface of Big Blue Button where we can schedule meetings. I did some already. Can add some more. Bachelor Informatics, coaching meeting at 5 p.m. And over here are my groups again. So I attach this meeting to the conference. And then it's scheduled. Okay, so if we go back to the presentation, now we can also, and that would be even nicer, use the institutional portal. And then you will have these applications side by side in one screen view. So then you can really start using these applications from different providers side by side. That would be really nice, together with the context and with a single sign-on. So if we start up a portal, SurfNet created the demonstration portal to show to what extent this infrastructure can be used. Sorry, wrong URL, this one. This is the landing page. Choose your home organization, sign in. We all know this concept. Well, and then you will have a iGoogle-like portal. I can create as many tabs as I like. They're over here. If I would like to have more, I can put them over here, put some ordering in it. Well, and we had this classroom case, Bachelor Informatics students. So I create a tab for this group. And now we can start adding open social gadgets to this tab. Well, you will recognize the names of products you have seen in the previous slides and the previous demonstration. There's LiveRay, but there's also a gadget for Surf Teams. Well, maybe it's convenient if we put that one in there at first. It asks whether I would like to share my my attributes with this application. And then you will see the groups that you've seen before in LiveRay, in Alfresco, and in Big Blue Button are available here again. So I can add new groups, or maybe add another student halfway the course. But I can also add a gadget for example, LiveRay. And I will do the same for Big Blue Button. And on and on and on. And in theory, I can add every open social gadget that's available. So all the gadgets that are available in iGoogle as well. So let's reshuffle this a little bit. Put Teams over here. Okay, so now we have this Big Blue Button gadget. And it tells me, well, these are the meetings that you have planned for all your teams. So maybe we could do a trick with group context. The same applies for Surf Teams. It's showing all my teams. And also LiveRay, it does not have a clue of which group context it should present information now. So now we take the next step. Click at Team. We say Assign to Team. And now this tab will be linked to one of my teams I'm a member of. So we choose Bachelor Informatics, say Assign. it pops up with the next question. Would you like to share the selection of gadgets and tabs to your other team members? Well, I will keep that for later. But now, it's a detail over here. You can see that this tab is connected to the group Bachelor Informatics. And the gadgets over here are behaving according to this context. So it says, this big blue button, conferencing gadget. Oh, this is Team Bachelor Informatics. So then this meeting applies to you. So I can enter the meeting here right now. Similarly to this applies to serve teams. It shows the members of this team for Bachelor Informatics. And LiveRay does the same. Well, there are no documents uploaded for this team already because they just started the course, but you can imagine they can now start adding documents. So now we made a selection of gadgets. I can invite the other members to add this selection to their profile as well. Well, and like for the Bachelor's Informatics students, I also previously made a tab for the Master's Informatics students. It's already available over there, and it's links to the Master Informatics group. Well, there are no meetings planned. There's a Foodle list available. And hey, there's LiveRay again, but now shows documents because it knows it should show documents for this context. There are some other gadgets in there, for example, group notifications for your group members, and also Serve Media gadget to show videos that are applicable or relevant for this group context, for the joint project they are working on. Okay, so far the demo portal. Still 10 minutes left. So that's what you have seen now. Taking these applications from different providers, no matter commercial, Enron, institutional, put them together, single sign-on and group context. Well, you can imagine that it's important to search for as many applications that are available to make available via this infrastructure. So that's a large part of my job right now. And that's why we also created the domestication wiki to share this knowledge about interesting, relevant applications that they have the support for SAML and group support, and maybe have a gadget available as well, and to link them up to the ServConnect infrastructure. Well, here's just a short list of the applications that we've been working on. Well, you've seen Alfresco and LiveRay for document sharing, Sakai for learning management systems. We already did a pilot with WebEx. It supports a single sign-on. It has an open social gadget available as well. No groups, unfortunately. We will do the same with Acrobat.com for Adobe Connect. We know that IBM Lotus Live will have the support, so we will start working on that one. Media Moza, which was created at SurfNet as well, will have support, etc. Confluence, Moodle, and maybe more tailored towards research applications, Dataverse Network. Well, and there will be many institutional services that would be interesting to link up experimental tools and perhaps later on devices, and that's something we will start doing from this summer in the Enabling Dynamic Services project, where we will start focusing on research and how we can facilitate them with this infrastructure. Okay, so a first version of this infrastructure is available now in beta. So our users in the Netherlands can start trying it, doing pilots. But there are still many topics that are not covered yet. Well, Niels already mentioned some organizational topics like licensing. Well, we have to do something with governance. How can we make transparent to our users if there is a problem where they should go to? So that's an important topic as well. But still, there are also interesting things on the technical part of it that we would further like to elaborate on. For example, virtual organizations. This is the classical case. We are dealing with institutions. On the top you see University in Rotterdam, University of Groningen and Leiden. And if we take, for example, Google Apps, it only supports single SAML endpoints. But we are dealing more and more with virtual organizations, and we should really facilitate them with a way to start using these cloud applications like Google Apps. So imagine, well, this is not imaginary, this is a real life case. In the Netherlands, we have the Netherlands Bioinformatics Center, NBIC, and actually it's a group of researchers in bioinformatics from different universities working together. And also there are some guest users involved, maybe from pharmaceutical companies, maybe from abroad, which would like to enter a collaboration environment with their own federation accounts, so inter-federation is an issue as well. But we also would like to provide a way to add guests to such projects, maybe with another status, guest status, but they should be able to get in there. So now by using SurfConnect as the middleware, it can act as a virtual identity provider. So what an administrator at the Netherlands Bioinformatics Center could do is creating a group where people from different institutions can become a member of. So there are 6 from Rotterdam, 10 from Amsterdam, etc. And they are all in this group. And then SurfConnect, the middleware, can act as a single SAML endpoint for Google Apps. Because I know they're using Google Apps. They're paying for it. So this means that users from these different institutions can use their institutional account, but can start using Google Apps or maybe other these bigger cloud applications that only support single SAML endpoints and start working in this single environment. Well, to give you an example, 5 minutes left. And now we go to our development environment, so that's a bit tricky because Google Apps is linked up to that one. Apps. So I first entered this in Google Apps with my, by the way, this is our new wave, which shares many features from the Disco Juice project. Enter Google Apps. And there we are, at the SurfNet apps instance of Google Apps. So, and I would like to provide access to one of these guest users as well. So, if we go to the portal. No, not that one. SurfNet. Well, I prepared a tab over here, which is also a virtual organization, which has the Google Apps gadgets in there. So the documents are here again. There's Google Talk, the calendar, tasks, but also some weather forecasts. And I would like to share this tab with some of my guest users. And one of them is Albert at EMC Square. So I sent an invitation to him. And that's done. Okay, and now I change my identity. Go to a different browser. Start a new session. Go to apps again. And now I will enter Google Apps with my Facebook account. And as you can see, now I can enter the same instance of apps, the one at SurfNet, with my Facebook account, like being a full member. And the same applies to the portal instance. Where is it? Over here. I go there with my guest account. Then I find, after logging in, there's one open invite. There it is, by Paul van Dijk. Show invite. Paul van Dijk wants to share a tab with gadgets. These are the gadgets in there. Say accept. And there it is. And we can start collaborating. Okay. For so far, virtual organizations. And perhaps they would like to use more high-end applications as well, like My Experiment, or access publications via PubMed or publishers. and maybe like to schedule grid resources as well, like they do at the University of Indiana with their Polar Grid portal, Open Social portal. Okay, then my final slide. I'm happy to announce that all the work we did, also sometimes based on work of others, but that the work we did is now documented and described in openconnects.org, where you can find all the documentation, but also the SVN repositories, and you can download, if you would like to, if you're interested, the things you have seen in the past few minutes. So the components that you will find in here are, for example, this Open Social portal, and for the near future we will extend this portal together with some other partners in the Netherlands and from abroad in an Apache incubator project. But the code that's available now, based on what you have seen in the demonstration, is available via openconnects.org. The same applies to the Open Social container, the code that has been written for the engine block. Sometimes it was a modification of, for example, Corto and Janus, made by Wave or by Uninet. And there is code available for the interface that you need, everything you need as an administrator to administer the platform. The license that are applicable on these components are the Apache license for the code, and for the content there's the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 important. So that means that you can use and change everything you like as long as you cite SurfNet as the provider. Okay, to finalize my presentation, some pointers. If you'd like to know more about SurfConnects, you can browse to surfconnects.nl. There are some screenshot movies over there. For more technical information, you can visit wiki.surfnetlabs. If you're interested in what Open Social means for our applications, not only enterprise but also for research and education, the Open Social for the Enterprise white paper is a suggested reading. You can find it at opensocial.org. And well, if you have questions, please ask them now. Thank you.
Any questions?
It's a really simple one. What's uptake like?
Well, we have just started in beta. You mean how many users?
Yeah.
As almost 80% of our users in the Netherlands are linked to the Surf Federation, it could be something like this, and they can all start using it. And one of our streaming video services, Surf Media, will be linked up within 1 month. So then all these users will start using our infrastructure.
Under what condition could you integrate the Google Docs into SurfConnects? Did you have to sign a contract? Do you have to pay for it? What's the conditions?
Well, I'm not from the marketing team of Google, of course, but Google has this one type of license, it's apps for education, and it's free if you can show that you're from an educational research institution, and then you have to tell them how many users you expect, and then you can just start using it. And if you have the apps for education type of license, you will have SAML support in there already.
Further questions? Okay.
Thank you for your
Let's
attention.
thank Paul again. So our next speaker is Jan Meijers from Uninet. He'll show us one application which I guess already is domesticated.
More domesticated than I am in any case. We're a little bit of a cowboy project, so I chose the appropriate attire, I feel. Good morning, last session before lunch. I hope the audio is good. Yep. I'm Jan Meyer, I work for Uninet in Norway, Norwegian NREN, and I'm going to tell you about the file sender project. I've put 2 URLs on the screen where you can find more information for those of you who currently have laptops open. The blog is where we do our announcements. The website is where you'll find all the project information. So what is File Sender about? People share data. Whether you're a researcher, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a student, you have big-ish data files that you want to share with other people. Okay.
Usually you don't want to publish everything that you want to share. So how do you do that? Well, you key in an email, recipients, attach file, click send. That. Who has had this message? This is an annoying problem. And most of us know how to work around this. Yeah, private website, HT access, blah, blah, blah. 90% of the people don't know how to solve this. So that is the problem that FileSender tries to solve, to get people to be able to share big files. Something like that. 2011, right? So this is 2011 reality. This is what people use to transfer big files. They take a USB stick, they take a DVD. Heavens forbid, they take hard drives and they FedEx them from Australia to Austria. Why do they do that? Well, because it's the easiest way for them to get the job done. Not everyone happens to have a particle physics degree and can use the grid infrastructure and use grid FTP. So these people resort to this, while we have spent millions of euros in building a pretty neat gigabit network infrastructure to allow them to do that. So obviously, there is something missing. We have the network to do exactly what they want to do. We don't really have the file transfer service to let them do that. So that is what our project is about. What we need is a far better path of least resistance. We need to make sharing data fun. Or at least we need to make it such that they no longer think, oh God, and that's going to take me like 2 hours, and I have a meeting in 1, and I can never make that. So we need to make this as easy as possible, and we need to get it to the stage where users no longer think it's hard to share data across institutional boundaries, across continents. No, they just need to be able to say, click, done. Off to the thing that I really want to do. We need a lifestyle change. This is a little excerpt of the collaboration tool that we're using to guide this project. We're using Skype. That's because we have project members in Norway, in the Netherlands, in Ireland, in Belgium, and in Australia. Skype happens to be the tool that works for us. I put this up to stress that we're not here to build a file sender empire. That's not what we're interested in. We're interested in lifestyle change. So if someone else comes along next month and says, hey, we have a tool that is just far way better than what you have, and here's the argumentation, then we're like, yay, go ahead, because it's all about sharing that data. That is what we're interested in. So if you kind of just generalize and think a bit about what we're trying to achieve, what we want for users to be able to do, and again, we address the 90% of users, the 95% of users that are not IT people, and that do not have a particle physics degree. So we're addressing students, teachers, language researchers, what have you. We want to have painless sharing of arbitrarily large files with a private audience through a trusted intermediary. In green, you'll see the bits and pieces where FileSender is different from the 100 other products that you'll find on the market. Because yes, there are plenty of services that do this, but they don't do exactly what our user community needs. We've looked long and hard. We didn't find anything that actually did that, and that is the reason why we set out and built it ourselves. We wanted to have painless. Painless means no registration before you can use it. It means no cluttering of the user interface with unnecessary things like ads that just distract you from what you want to do. It means no technical requirements on your desktop, please. It means I should just be able to go someplace and use it like I'm booking a ticket, like I'm watching a YouTube movie. It should be that easy, and it should be just point, click, and go. Arbitrarily large. This is a little bit of a technical point. Browsers, most of them, still happen to have 32-bit limits. 32-bit means not larger than 2 gig. So using standard technical methods, within the browser environment, which is where you want to be, you can't upload a file larger than 2 gig. If I look in my, my file sender logs, I see users do that. About 1/3 of file transfers that I see happening are larger than 2 gig. That's a problem. Most of the providers out there, they solve this by making you download the special dedicated client. Well, that's not really what you want. You want to share them with a private audience. So you want to have full control over who has access to your files. You don't want them just be out there on the web. And an important one, and we didn't realize how important that was until we got user feedback. Yep, trusted intermediary. We, the NRENs, are in a fairly unique position. The users trust us. We already transport their packets. So they are comfortable with their files sitting at a server that we're running. They want to know where their data is. This is the same discussion that you time and again have when you talk about cloud. Yeah, but then my data is somewhere, I don't know where it is, and it might, God forbid, be in the United States and fall under the Patriot Act. Help. Or in other countries that have similar legislation. This is essentially what FileSender does. Painless sharing, arbitrarily large files, private audience, trusted intermediary. While developing the functionality, so that's what we wanted to achieve, so how did we do that and what did we end up with? We've applied a couple of guiding principles. We want it really to be as painless as watching a YouTube movie. My mother can watch YouTube, anyone can watch YouTube without worrying. That's what we want. No installs, no nothing, just... The other thing, fire and forget. A 2 gig file, however fast your network, that's going to take time to upload from your desktop to that central server. What you don't want is that you have to wait for that and keep an ongoing process in your head. I have to check whether that went all right. No, you want to say, okay, email addresses of sender, this is the file, go. And then you no longer want to be worried about it. You want to go off doing whatever it is that you do with your life. We wanted this to be for people who have better things to do with their lives. That means it has to be productized and properly packaged in such a way that it is really painless to use again. Our users are not stupid. They can do anything they want because they're researchers, they're in academia. Really, they are not stupid. It's just that, well, their area of interest doesn't happen to be in figuring out how to get a file to the other side of the ocean. So we have to do that for them. Federated by design, we're entirely, well, we're not even domesticated. What's that for a strange concept? We just do this. It's built in. You hook it up to your federation and it works. And important to notice, we're not Dropbox. FileSender doesn't do Dropbox. It does file transport, it doesn't do storage. That way you get rid of a large amount of problems that are associated with storage. This is the basic workflow. User goes to a website, logs on with, of course, their federated account, sends the file to the central server, including the recipients that the file is supposed to go to. The server then takes care of the rest. It ships emails to the intended recipients with a download link. The recipients click on the download link, and a feedback email goes back to the sender that says, yep, thing has been downloaded. Different recipients get different links, and the links are unique. So it means properly unique. There is a password encoded in each link. What this does is, if a user takes the URL and puts it on a public forum or shares it with people that they shouldn't have shared it with, you can't prevent that, but at least you know who did this. And then you can take whatever is the appropriate measure in your country. It might be a baseball bat, it might be a legal case, but that's up to you. At least you know who did it. This is what it looks like. This is the main screen. This is nearly the only screen of importance for most users. I put green arrows to the stuff that a user needs to do before using this. So I'm sitting here, I've just received my gen analysis, I want to share it with my collaboration partner in Sweden. I enter the email address, I select the file to upload, I click send, done. That's it. The thing is built in Flash, so hence YouTube, you can use it. The blue arrow points at the expiration date. That is the time when the file will be automatically deleted. Again, fire and forget. So again, I don't have to worry about it after I've sent it to someone. It will be just totally automatically deleted from the intertubes. You can also see, where's my laser pointer? There's a little voucher button here. So I said federated logon, right? What happens if I have a collaborator in the US that doesn't have federated logon? Yeah, yeah, then I can send them a one-time upload invitation. They'll use that. The My Files button that gives access to controls like delete file, resend the download link, or add a recipient. That's it. That's all it does. But it does it really well. That is the tool. The tool was produced by a project. FileSender is an open source project. It's released under a BSD license, which means whatever you want to do with it, you can. FileSender is funded by a consortium of currently 5 NRENs. You see the logos of them over there. ARNet, HCANet. 6. Guido says 6 NRENs. It looks like on this conference, we've managed to acquire a 6th consortium member, which would be our Slovenian colleagues, and I'm very happy with that. This was done on purpose. I've underlined project. So what we're not doing is just throwing some software at you and say, have fun with it. We've taken care that we have documentation, we have quality control, we have everything there that we can actually take in your contributions. So if you want to contribute, we can take that in. The reason for that is we didn't want reliance on any NREN. That's one. If an NREN decides to, well, this is no longer interesting for us, the project needs to be able to live on. And us alone didn't have the money to actually get this done. We've seen the strategy work. The known use, the use that we know of course, it's the NRENs in the consortium partners. Yep, sure, that's what you'd expect. But without us doing anything, we've gained use in other countries, other NRENs. I know of a couple of commercial sites that are using it because I checked the download logs of the packages. But we don't know exactly who they are. So apparently our strategy of making sure that it's easy to use, easy to work with, easy to collaborate with, that works. A couple of short facts. Project started in April 2009. We've had field trials going on from October 2009 in Australia. Lots of practical experience. We've released the 1.0 release this year in January. We have a core team of 6 people in 3 countries. Backend runs on very easy PHP, Apache, Postgres, plus, thank you, Andreas, simple SAML PHP, which neatly takes care of all the authentication. It's released as Debian packages, RPMs, plus a nicely documented tarball. Front end runs on Flash. For the larger than 2 gig, we currently use the Google Gears plugin. That's the thing that's used to do offline mode for Google Docs and Gmail. But Google has said, nah, that's turning into HTML5. We looked at that and check. HTML5 has a nice file API. That means that from release 1.5, which is coming out later this year, we'll have larger than 2 gig uploads directly in the browsers, but only in modern browsers. We figured that that's a pretty good message. You want to get the full functionality, get yourself a really modern browser. Experiences. A couple of the things that we've seen, a couple of the use cases. A veterinarian from Oslo sending a video of a stiff horse syndrome to a collaborator in New Zealand. I thought that looked weird. It turns out this is a horse disease. Okay, fine with that. Student religious studies who films with standard photo camera religious ceremonies and then shares that with her fellow students in the project group. Those files are 300 meg. It saved her from going to school, going back again, because she needed to deliver a USB stick. That's value. A guy doing DNA analysis with a sensor-on-chip machine. That thing blurts out 500 gig. And he says, yeah, and we've got a machine of the Stone Age. The next one does this not in 24 hours, but in 8. Those are serious files. The MRI scans that go from Melbourne to Austria, they shipped hard drives across the ocean. Now think, what happens if you ship the wrong hard drive? That has a turnaround, it has an RTT of like 2 weeks. That's pretty annoying. You want to improve on that. Now, here's a question. So why didn't this happen before? Because what we did is not rocket science, right? We did some PHP, we did some front-ending in Flash, we did a bit of Gears. And why didn't this happen before? It's not that hard. Well, it turns out it's a bit harder than you would think. I don't know why it didn't happen before or didn't happen elsewhere. I know why we succeeded. We succeeded because we set it up as a proper collaboration from day one. We succeeded because we had a very clear goal in mind, and we did not allow any deviation from that goal. So we didn't go make it into Dropbox and wait with the release yet another year. No, this is what we want to achieve, this is what we'll do. We followed our guiding principles. We selected people, not on which organization they belonged to, but on how good they were at what they were doing. Those are a couple of the key factors that made this into a success. That was most of what I had to say. I'll leave you with a question. So here's a project where we have 6 NRENs funding it. We have currently 6 people actively working on it, and we do get more contributions than that. It's not that expensive. I think it may have something like 100,000 euros involved in it at the moment. This has been the easiest thing in my 13 years in NREN land to sell to my users. I explain it in 4 minutes, and they say, oh yeah, that's exactly what I need. Thank you so much. No one has yet said that this was a stupid idea and you shouldn't have wasted my taxpayers' money on it. So why doesn't this happen more often? That was what I had to say. Before you start applauding, I'm the front man, but I'm lucky to have 2 of my team members here. So could you 2 please get up here? No, 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 no. Uh-huh. The guy in the blue is Guido Aben. He's my partner in crime and he works for Arnet in Australia. The guy in the black is Sander Janssen. He's our principal tester, bug hunter, and release manager. And he's just made the release of our 1.0.1 release today, which is a small bug fix release. Sitting here. Thanks a lot for your attention. If there are any questions.
Any questions for Jan? They'll still serve lunch in 10 minutes, so we have time for questions.
Jan, I did a presentation on domestication. You're actually on the wrong side of things in that scenario, on the service provider side. Could you share a little bit of your experience with hooking up identity federations in their current status?
You really want to know? For FileSender, this is relatively easy. The only thing that FileSender needs is a name, it's an email address, and it's a unique identifier. It took us a bit of time to figure out, so what kind of unique identifiers have you actually got? Which ones can we use? What I often experience in talking with federation people is you kind of get this whole blurb of, yeah, attribute here, attribute there. I don't have time to be a federation expert. So that's what I sometimes run into. And then it takes me time to figure out what we need, why. All that documentation is not very service provider friendly. I think other than that, for FileSender, it's a fairly smooth process. As long as you know how to actually hook things up to your local federation. A problem that I have is, so I've said that we are very rigorous about a very simple, smooth user experience, right? So preferably between logon and using it, I would have nothing at all. It would just be one smooth ride, but it's not. In my case, I need guest access, and my federation doesn't have any real provisions for guest access in the standard way. We have one IDP, which is really nice. It looks really easy to use, but if I want to have the guest access, I have to get out of that. So a user with me presses logon, a first-time user, and then it gets a choice of use your FIDA identity, use a FIDA guest identity. What I've seen users do, and I know this because I asked them and I talked with them, they think that they need to register with the FIDA guest identity provider, and then they can log on using their FIDA identity. And that is when I get a slight headache, and I'm thinking, this is not good. This is not how it's supposed to be. So I would love to cut out that step, but currently I can't. And it's those little things that make life harder. Because now I had to make a screencast that focuses mostly on how do you get past the logon stage. I would rather not have that. And I realize these are only very small nagging problems, but I also know that to solve them, that actually takes quite a bit of time.
Still time for more questions? Gives me some exercise wandering to the back. Oh.
Hello. I like the look of this product. In the beginning, you said that users are doing the easiest thing for them. And I don't think we should diss the users for that, because what's easiest for them is often what's best for them. For example, they might be collaborating with someone who's on the end of an old ADSL link, and therefore receiving a 16 gig USB stick in the post is best for them. But if they've got good networking, then this will work. My question here is, what protection mechanisms are there to ensure that this isn't being actually abused and those 4 gig files are 4 gig files that might not be suitable?
What we've done, we have it to, from the upload perspective, we know who the user is. So I offer this as a service to my Norwegian community. Thanks to the federation, I know exactly who the user is. So if anything ever happens, I can simply say, look, I know who you are, and then, well, we can deal with that appropriately. Secondly, we've got a configurable acceptable use policy thingy that they have to click on. My acceptable use policy says, you shall not do spot on what you just said, use this for illegal purposes, according to national law. Norwegian law is a bit different than yours, I think, but so that's from the upload perspective. The download perspective, you can't prevent people from sharing URLs, but again, the person who uploaded it knows who the person they send it to is by virtue of their email address. So that's the approach that we've taken so far. So we're saying as a service provider, look, we're providing a transport service, we don't care. We know who the users are, and in practice, if I look in my logs, the users are actually aware of this. I don't know why, but they're essentially not using this service for sharing illegal files. Having said that, the students haven't discovered it yet, so that might change the equation. Does that answer the question?
I guess so. I mean, that sort of leaves a second question of, if the users can share the URLs with third parties, then that means that this file can be downloaded by people who weren't the intended recipient.
Yeah, but this then is a matter of people error. There's not much you can do about that. If the recipient intentionally shares that file, well, if they want to do that, they could also just download the file and then re-upload it to someone else. So there's not much that we can do against that.
I think the point is, what you would need is a measure to quickly remove these files. I mean, you may know who the user is, whose account was just compromised for that purpose.
At the moment, this is trivial because you just go to the file store and you manually delete it. The next version should have a bit more administrative control for exactly that. Currently, it's the user that uploaded it that can just say, click delete. I, as an admin, can't do that easily.
Any more questions? Oh, they pop up. That's good.
Sorry if I maybe have missed that during the presentation, but do you have a default validity time for the upload so that you don't have things sticking there permanently, more or less, or for 2 years or whatever?
What we've done is, let me see if I can go back there. You see an expiry date. Server side, there is a configuration option that says this is the maximum expiry period that you can choose, that you can allow a user to choose. On my install, this is set on 20 days. So we say within that 20-day period, a user can choose whether it's up to 20 days or less. If you feel comfortable with having a year, you do that. So that's all there.
Transport service anymore. It's not a transport service.
Yes, it is. It's a store and forward.
It's like slow mail.
It is
the postal service actually stores this for a little while till it delivers it.
It's exactly like how email servers work. It just uses a different user interface. I should probably stress that nearly all of the things that you could want to configure are configurable server-side. And last experience that I know of is that it takes a newcomer with reasonable Linux experience about half an hour to 1 hour to get a file sender installation up and running. Then you're operational, that's it. So it's not hard. It's not hard on the user, it's not hard on the sysadmin. More questions? There's one over there.
Hello, I'm Harri Kuusisto from Funet Finland. I'm very interested in your presentation and this software. How much disk space you need to run this kind of system?
Now that is a good question that ultimately I do not have the answer to. What I can say is how much I at the moment have and how much Guido has at his install. We run on 6 terabytes. If I look in the logs let's see, we currently have something like 300 users. I think Guido is on, what was it, 700, 800? 855. Looking at the disk usage now, on average, I would say 25 gigs. However, having said that, I know that I have this gene analysis person. He ships around files of 40 gig. So if he has a good weekend, he might end up at just using 1 terabyte of that. I had an inquiry from a university college that has a multimedia course, and they were organizing a short movie festival, and they said, could we use this to take in the movies? And I said, yeah, sure. So how big are they? Why did you call me about this? Well, they're 130 gig on average, and I was like, I thought they were short. So I hugely overdimension it, to make really sure that the one thing that the user never ever gets is disk full, because that's the experience that you want to prevent. And because we also promote the notion of unlimitedness, unlimited file size, yeah, it means you need some big disk space. I know in Croatia they're running on replicated 100 terabytes. What we also see is uptake so far doesn't go exponential. It is a very nice linear graph. Yeah. So from the looks of it, it is fairly predictable. But again, I don't know what happens if the huge mass of students discovers this. So when it takes off, yeah, you need to be ready.
I have another one. Is there a way to limit the maximum size of the file which can be there?
Yeah. There's a, you simply say maximum file size is that much. Okay. I think we set it on 300 gigs. 300 gigs would take the average user something like 30 hours, I think. So in practice, going through the browser and all that.
Any more questions? Okay, let's first thank Jan again.
Thank you.
So I guess I'm happy to conclude that the young people in the NREN community come up with lots of cool ideas and things like they could do, so it's probably the worst thing we can do is promote them to managers and make them completely ineffective. Thank you. So before I release you to lunch, a couple of announcements. This afternoon, there are the poster sessions, so please go and listen to the poster sessions, listen to the people that prepare posters. Then for those people that haven't gotten their conference gift, i.e. the little surveillance video recorder, please do so. Show up at the Terena booth and collect that. For the social event today, as announced already this morning, we meet 6:45 down in the hotel lobby to wander to the trams where they serve us drinks. For people that would like to go directly to the venue, they should have received instructions in their emails detailing how they get there. So, having said all that, good appetite.